maybe other people were more lucky. I mean, I have to add to this that we were so shit, right, that it actually felt quite embarrassing, because it's not like we were some amazing fucking band and we were looking for the perfect singer. We were pretty terrible ourselves. And the funniest part of it was people coming along and going, well, how much do I get paid? And we're like looking at each other going, well, nothing. You know, like
a cup of beer or coffee at the end of the day or something.
Not even that, you know, you don't even get your fucking tube fare covered, all right? Right? There is no money here whatsoever. We're going to be asking you for money because we need to pay for the rehearsal room and we all have to chip in, right? So,
right. Wow. It's amazing the way you describe the story. But, okay, but you were not that bad, because a little bit later on, you end up meeting Ivo Watts, was, you know, the founder of 4AD, and you recorded the EP called Scar, right? Which is, I don't know, there was like a year after that or 2 years after that. But I don't know. First of all, Ivo, I think Ivo had like a nervous breakdown, and I think he moved to New Mexico here in the United States. I don't know what happened to the guy, but 4AD, and I know I have interviewed and met a lot of people that they were at one point or another part of the record label, and he is, right. He's still alive. He's an amazing guy with a visionary, and he saw something in you that perhaps you couldn't see, right? I think at the beginning you mentioned the book. I don't know how you end up meeting the guy, but you have some song, the guy saying, oh, it's not good, you need to change this, you need to change that. I will put you in touch with another assistant to make changes, and then we'll talk, or something, right? But, then one way or another, you end up releasing that particular EP, the first one, Scar, in 1999. So it's a 6-track mini album, and it is, I think that was before Robin for Cocktail Twin got involved, but that's a great EP. I mean, if I have seen the stuff,
I don't think that we were. When I say that we were share, what I mean really is that we, okay, you could say raw if you like. It's just that unless you had, like, Ivo obviously heard something in the music that he could tell just needed a bit of developing. But, our ideas were way ahead of our ability, right? So, because we didn't really know how to rehearse. We didn't really know how to play. I didn't really know how to sing. The ideas were all there. And don't forget, what I think is quite interesting now is that every teenager learns how to use GarageBand, right? They can make their own fucking records, by the time by they're 12 or something. They know how to put a song together. It may be a shit song, but they can do it. We didn't have those tools. All we had were the actual musical instruments and trying to make it work in a room with a band. And that takes time. It takes a lot of practice. There's a point at which you actually do have to do the work, right? And we hadn't reached that stage yet. So when we went in to record Star, it wasn't that Ivo was telling us what to change or where to change it. It just needed some discipline, and we needed a producer to go, okay, this is a click track. You need to keep in time. If you mess it up, we can stop the recording, we can drop it in. This was all new to me. I was like, wow, so I can literally sing this line by line until I get it in tune. That's okay. You know what I mean? I thought we were recording in the fucking 1950s. I thought it had to sound perfect from the minute you press record. And actually, so it was a real education to find out that you could mess with the sounds, and you could do a double track vocal, and you can put reverb on, and you can add all these embellishments that can polish the sound, because the song itself is good, but it's struggling to be heard because you're so uncoordinated, and you know what I mean? So, I think it was all there. It just needed some discipline. and some work, you know. And once we got that, which we did because we ended up playing live a lot. And so, you know, eventually, you know, our ability kind of matched what it needed to. But, you know, none of us were ever very confident. We still aren't, you know. I'm not, you know, funny enough, I did this show the other night where I had to sing a song with Cornelius. It's at the fucking Barbican, you know, it's this seated venue and it's like this sort of hushed atmosphere. And I go out and do this one song. I have never been so nervous in my life, you know.
Really?
And they were all so sweet. They were like, oh, Nick Chan, it was so good and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, no, it wasn't. It was fucking terrible. Everyone tells me it was great, right? But I'm just like, you know, just thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? This is crazy, you know. So
I want to close my eyes and go home. Well, a little bit after that, you end up recording the second EP. By the way, the song for the first EP, I think it's called Ethereal. It's a great track, actually. I listened to all your music when I was putting question for this interview. In 1990, not long after, you end up recording the second EP. I think it's called Mad Love, and at the time, you know, Robin from Cocktail Twin got involved, and so forth, right? So, what memories do you have of it? Because that's another great EP. I mean, maybe at the time, like you mentioned, you were uncoordinated, and you felt that you guys know what you were doing, and so forth. But both those EPs and the third one, I think is called Sweetness and Lie, but it was produced by a different person. It was produced by Tin. And what memories do you have? So if Robin Guthrie from the Cocktail Twin got involved in the second EP, not in the first one, right? And then if I don't know who was the producer for the first one, but I don't know if it was Ivo or someone else, but big difference.
John Fryer.
Joe Fryer. Oh, he's favorite famous guy as well. Big difference between John and Robin style to mix, produce a record.
I mean, the thing with John Fryer doing Scar is that because when we signed to 4AD, you know, there was an issue that, you know, I talk about in the book, this guy, Howard Goff, who ended up becoming our manager. But before we signed to 4AD, he just thought we were terrible and he didn't want us to be signed. And because 4AD was quite a, you know, close-knit kind of, you know, and, you know, Ivo was the head of 4AD, but everybody had to be involved in the music, you know, and obviously he had Vaughan and Chris doing the artwork. You know, everyone really needed to have the enthusiasm for the music. And so he sent us in the studio with John Fryer really to do demos. Those are demos. They're not, you know, so it's not like John Fryer was thinking, right, I'm going to produce this 6-track mini album and I'm going to throw all these kind of ideas at it. He was literally recording demos. So it was quite basic. And, you know, really, it's just that we did 3 demos and then they really liked them. And they said, okay, well, since you're already there, why don't you do another 3 and we'll put it out as a mini album? And I do think that, you know, sometimes I think Emma felt, particularly with, you know, I mean, there's a reason that we did Thought Forms again with Robin. You know, it was very underproduced. And I do wonder if Emma felt that if she'd known it was going to be a record and not demos, she would have approached it differently. But I could see that Ivo liked the rawness of it, you know, and it was just kind of capturing a band when they're so early on in their career. There is a kind of charm to that you will never be able to repeat again. Once they get a bit successful and they've got more money to spend on producers and it will be different. And so I really like Scar in that respect, because it captures a time for me that, you know, all the kind of fragility and the nervousness is there. And I actually think that's quite engaging.
Yeah, got it. How do you, so now the second one. So what do you think that if you will, Robin brought to the table, if you will, from the second EP, as compared to John, right?
Robin. Sorry, go on.
No, is it normal to? Since I'm not a musician, right? Maybe it may be a stupid question, but you know, the records are different. But the EP, I go, things that were demo, and then was Ivo approached Robin to say, "Hey, can you work with this band? They're great. They're not there yet, but they have potential." Or you?
No. So Emma, I think before we were involved with 4AD or anyone, we were just a gigging band. So Emma sent demo tapes out to various record labels and blah blah blah. And one of the people she sent it to was Robin Guthrie, and Robin was interested in us from before we were signed to 4AD. So he already wanted to work with us. And then when we were putting together Scar, I mean, it's difficult. It depends on who you talk to, because I wasn't party to these conversations. But Robin, I think, said that he wanted to do Scar, and Ivo didn't want him to. I think Ivo says, no, Robin was busy doing something else. So, whatever. Everyone has their own version of the story. But I do think that I think the Cocteau Twins and 4AD were reaching quite a difficult point in their relationship. So I do think that probably Ivo didn't really want us to make the album with Robin. I think he kind of pushed against it a bit. Whereas for us, we worked with John, we worked with Robin, we worked with Tim Freeze-Green. We enjoyed all of those experiences, but Robin was very closely knit by then in the band. He would come and see us when we did a John Peel session. He came along. Socially, we were spending quite a bit of time with him. He was a real champion of the band, and he absolutely wanted to do the album. He really did. And for us, having someone who of the stature of Robin Guthrie, who wants to make this record with you, who seems desperate to make this record with you, that's so flattering, and we had a great time making Mad Love with him. He taught us a lot about God, just the sound. And like I said, I had very little confidence as a singer, and he was incredibly encouraging, and he really brought out a lot in our songs. Emma loved working with him, and so it just seemed like a logical step. I mean, I can see that it had its difficulties in that he has a very particular sound. So by the time Spooky was recorded, people were a bit like, oh, well, just sounds like the bloody Cocteau Twins, because he's just put all his classic Cocteau Twins effects all over it. It didn't bother me, because it's not like I had a different idea, right?
That's right. Yeah, you have nothing to compare against. Hey,
it's not like I went in to record Spooky.
That's right.
It's not like I went in to record Spooky and thinking this is how I want it to sound, and he's changed it all. I was like, I don't fucking know how I want it to sound. Let's have a look what happens. And that was the record that came out, and it's I thought it sounded brilliant, and and also it ended up being a little bit problematic. But like I say, who gives a shit? At the end of the day, I thought it was a good record. And, you can sit there and kind of nitpick at why it wasn't perfect and what were the difficulties. I've documented all of that. Of course, everyone wants to make the perfect record. Anything that, I've done, I can look back and go, well, that was a bit of a fuck up and that was a bit of a fuck up. But hey, it's never going to be perfect. At the end of the day, it's the record that it is. So,
true.
But... And the record did very well. So
absolutely,
I have no complaints, really.
and then later on, it became, you guys ended up producing Sweetness and Lie, another EP, and that was all put together in an album called Gala. That's another great EP. I mean, I really, I don't know, I think I'm not a journalist. I'm a simple guy who loves music, right? So it's a great album as well. Yeah, it's perfect, not perfect, I don't care. It's a great album. And so after Sweetness Live, you I suppose with, 4, 6, like 12 or 15 tracks, you were touring and become more confident and making a living, I suppose, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were paid to do gigs and traveling and touring. I don't know if.
Do you know what? I mean, I do cover a lot of that in the book, because I think it's always very difficult for people who are not in that world to understand how it works. People always think that you're getting like shitloads of money or whatever. We weren't. I mean, we were getting more money than we'd ever had before, but we were students. We had no fucking money anyway, So someone to be on like £100 a week, to me, was like fucking great. This is amazing.
At the time. Yeah.
At the time. But it took me a while to realise, after all my friends at college had got proper jobs and were earning proper wages. And when I found out how much they were earning, I was thinking, shit, I had no idea you could make that much money out of a normal job. And, by then we were, and the thing is a lot of what's paid for in a band is, yes, you are going on tour, but you're working. The hotels, the transport, all of that's paid for by the record company, but it's not your money, you know what I mean? It's being spent on you so that you can work, right? And the actual money that is going into your bank account isn't very much. But at the end of the day, it's not like you need a huge amount when you're, 22 years old and back then rent was a lot cheaper, I mean, places were a lot shittier, but it didn't really matter so much because you're away for fucking months of the year. Like, who gives a shit? You know what I mean? And when you're on tour, you're getting fed and you're getting a hotel room, which, my God, believe me, when I was first going in hotel rooms, I thought I felt like a bloody millionaire. You know what I mean? And it's just some shitty motel or whatever, but it feels amazing. I mean, I can literally remember like ringing Steve up and going, fucking hell, there's a telephone in the toilet. I was so excited.
Good for you.
didn't take very much to make me happy in that time. But eventually, as you get older, you start to realize that it is quite tough. You're not getting that much money. It's difficult. Yeah. We were in a band where me and Emma got more money because we were the songwriters, so we had a publishing deal. And we did give a percentage of that to Steve and Chris, but we couldn't give an equal share. And then that's really difficult for two members of the band who haven't got enough money, so I totally understand why Steve left, and he thought, you know what, this was fun, but I need to go off and actually get a career where I actually make some money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But so they put all this EP together in an album called Gala, and then you went touring. I think that you guys did at the time, if I remember correctly, like 50 gigs or so in the US and Japan, right? That's the first time you end up playing here in the States, right? After in Gala and the year, right? Yeah. How would that music received here in the United States? I mean, you were playing in decent venues, and I don't know if I wasn't living in the United States, so I don't know if like shoegaze type of band were popular here in the United States. I think Cocktail Twin, people here at the time knew Cocktail Twin. I don't know if the Cranes and Oasis or My Bloody Valentine. I have no idea. I don't recall if those bands were popular here in the United States or not. So I don't know how difficult it was for you guys, if it was a lot of publicity behind the scene, for the record label and to promote your music.
I mean, I think it was quite difficult for us to tell as well. I think that because the channel for finding out about, or any information about music was through the music papers mostly. And I think that, I can remember in the 80s being like really shocked to discover that bands like The Cure and Depeche Mode were playing in stadiums, in America. It was like, what the fuck, right? It was unbelievable. And I think a lot of that was down to MTV. You know, suddenly there was this kind of format that meant, you know, people like all of America was, you know, getting MTV, and they could all watch these bands and see their polished videos, and they look kind of exotic probably to Americans, you know, who at the time probably had like big stadium rock bands like Chicago and Journey and things like that. And so you get someone like Boy George, it just looks insane, you know what I mean? And so
yeah.
And Thompson Twins, whoever, you know what I mean? So I think that did quite a lot. I mean, we went on 120 minutes. By then MTV had a kind of, you know, they were kind of mining that British alternative kind of, they called it alternative, you know. So it had a certain traction. But for us, I think it was very much in the major cities, you know. We didn't really do much in, you know, Kansas, you know, or St. Louis or whatever. It would be lots of college, you know, they had a whole college radio network, so that was a massive thing. You know, there was a whole infrastructure there that was supporting it. And then you had a major label, you know, all of us, Ride, all these bands, they may have been on independent labels in Britain, but those labels signed, you know, a deal with those American labels. So they had major label money behind them that would pay for the tour support, that would pay for the publicity. So, you know, it's a whole different machine. I mean, I suspect that, you know, most of these things are fueled by money. And I think that at the time, the success of bands like The Cure, or, you know, like I say, these bands, Flock of Seagulls, whoever the fuck you want to pick, you know, these bands that were suddenly filling stadiums. I think a lot of the American money kind of thought, shit, there's all these tiny little bands that we can find in Britain who, you know, there's this scene. And so they started snapping people up and, you know, realized that there was money to be made there. And then, and then after Britpop, sort of, you know, I mean, I think Oasis, I'm sure Oasis are big in America, but Britpop didn't really do what people thought it would do in America, right? So I think at that point they went, okay, we've had enough of this. And then they started looking at, you know, kind of solo artists, and that's where the money went, you know.
You mentioned the book that you guys via publishing, right? You got, I think it was at the time, if I remember correctly, it was like £80,000, and I think Howard took a percentage, and then you and Emma split, you know, a good percent of that, and the rest went to the boys. And so probably was kind of, I don't know, the first time that you saw more than £100 a week or so. You know,
yeah, but again, you know, I think I'll tell you what I really remember is getting my first publishing check, and it's not like you got it all in one go, right? It's like half, and then when you deliver the album, and then when the album is released. So, and you know, because we took quite a long time to release an album, because we were fucking touring the whole time. You know, we were touring the EPs, we were touring the mini album, so all this took a long time. And I remember getting my first check for £12,500, right? Wow. And I was like, fucking hell, I felt like a, you know, like a fucking rock star then. But that's when I remember talking to like mates who had got proper jobs by then, who were earning more than that. And what I realised is this fucking check has to last me about a year and a half. So it's not that much in the greater scheme of things, you know what I mean? It's nice to get it in one go, for sure. And we were very sensibly advised to put a deposit on a flat, and which was absolutely the right thing to do, you know. But I didn't really give a shit at the time. It didn't really bother me. You know, I felt incredibly privileged to be doing a job that just seemed like amazing. I thought, fuck me, you know what I mean? I'm traveling the world, I'm playing shows, I'm getting to work with Robin Guthrie, I'm on 4AD. I mean, what the fuck? You know, life couldn't get better. And unfortunately, this is the problem. When you're that young and you're that dazzled, you think that that's plenty of money, and it isn't, right? And that's why everyone becomes quite bitter when they get older and realizes that everybody else has made all the money and you're still sitting there with your £12,500 check that's got to last you a year.
A year and a half, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I know what you mean. What memory do you have? I think in June 1990, you ended up playing the Glastonbury Festival, which is very, very famous in the UK, in your country. And any crazy memory? Well, it's on the book, but if that we're talking to Nikki about this great book. It's easy read. It's like $20 on Amazon or so, the place where we buy records, and it's a great. What memory do you have for the any funny anecdote from Glastonbury 1990?
So I actually wrote a chapter for the book where I talked about what happened to me at Glastonbury, and I ended up just taking it out because I kind of edited the book quite heavily even before it was edited by the publisher, because it was a funny story, but it's just another drug story. And basically what happened is when we played in 1990 at Glastonbury, the Happy Mondays were headlining, I think, or they were certainly there, and they had a lot of drugs on them. And Howard, our manager, was, a bit of an animal, for drugs. And he thought it would be a terrific idea to spend our entire fee on buying a load of ecstasy off the Happy Mondays and kind of sharing it out amongst all our friends, which sounded like a great idea. But in practice, I'm not a very good drug taker. And, I suffer from immense peer pressure, which is why I don't take drugs, because I'm one of those very annoying people with drugs who is like, oh my God, everybody else seems to be having a really good time. Maybe mine aren't working. And then I sort of take another one. And before I know it, I'm having like some sort of psychotic episode, right? So actually what happened is I went missing for about a day and a half at Glastonbury after we played, right? And no one could find me. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I was literally trapped in a nightmare. And I ended up, someone gave me a lift. I was like, I tell you what I remember is walking around Glastonbury. I'd lost my shoes and I was in complete trauma. I thought in my head, I thought that they were reading my diaries out over the PA and that everyone was fucking, it's like your worst social media nightmare, right? And I just thought, like, I can remember walking along and thinking, I know what I have to do. I was walking probably along a motorway or an A road, and I just remember seeing this kind of ditch, and I thought, okay, I think what I have to do is just lie in this ditch until I die, and then all this will end. And at that point, some guy came up to me who clearly saw I was fucking off my nut and said, "You all right?" And he was really nice and really chatty. And I remember sort of thinking, oh, what's going on? Like, and then he kind of he took me up to this like petrol station and he got me a lift back to London. And I kind of got, put out at Hammersmith roundabout, and I was sitting there, and this really creepy guy came up to me and clearly wanted me to, he probably thought I was fucking homeless or something. And he clearly wanted me to go back to his flat to do whatever the fuck he wanted to do with me. And I remember thinking, oh, this is part of the process, so I have to do this, right? But I thought, just before I do it, I'm just going to ring Emma, right? And I said, oh, I've just got to make a phone call. And I rang Emma and she was like, where are you? Fuck it. Stay there. Thank God, right? But yeah, it made me realise how vulnerable you can be if you're, drugs are not for me. It's totally the wrong thing. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't do anything, but it was popular at the time. And then the great album came later. I think for the first album, Spooky, was released in January 1992. But before that, you guys did two EPs. One's called Black Spring, and the other one is For Love, right? So, and the first album, I have it here, will be showing people. That's Spooky, which is it's a great album, man. Very, very good. I really like the band. I really like. I don't care what everybody else think or that. It's a great album, you know. How difficult was to put that together and so on and so forth? What memory do you have from that?
I think with, you know, to be honest, with all of our albums, it was, you know, once it's your job and you're signed to a label, it just becomes this cycle, you know, and some of that is quite good. You know, it's great to be in a position, unlike now, you know, we all have jobs. I cannot do this full time because I need to make some money as well and pay the rent, right? Or the mortgage or whatever. And the point is that it's a wonderful position to be in where this is what you do. You know, your studio time is paid for. It's your job, blah, blah, blah. But there is a kind of relentlessness to this, you know, right, go in and record the album. Now you do the promotion. Now you go on tour, blah, blah, blah. Now it's the next one and the next one and the next one. And you've got to do the B-sides and blah, blah, blah. And it's very much out of your control. And I think that, you know, I loved making Spooky. We had a great time with Robin. When it came to making Split, you know, things had got a little bit more complicated. There were issues around 4AD and Ivo was sort of on the way out there. We had difficulties with management. You know, Steve had left, Phil had come in. It took a long time to find a producer. You know, so this is all kind of technical, practical, crappy stuff that gets in the way when you just want to make music, right? But there's all this other shit to deal with. And then also, you know, the music press starts to turn and they are slagging you off. And you know, my issue with the music press, and I think while I can understand a lot of the reasons why they, you know, operated in the way that they did, the problem is that objectively, I would argue that Split is as good a record as Spooky, right? So in a perfect world, it would be as well reviewed. But it wasn't the case. Spooky was like, already by the British music press, it was quite slagged off. But, you know, you could see the arbitrary nature of it, okay? This is not really about the music. It's about what's hip, what's in, what's out. These people are the tastemakers and they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And it's annoying when you put all your work into the record that you think you're doing your best work and they just go, well, it's just fucking shit, isn't it? And you think, okay, you may not like it, but come on, it's not shit, all right? And you know, this is the problem with, you know, and then the problem becomes, it's like, you know, I would argue that lots of people have slagged us off for making Love Life and, they jumped on the Britpop bandwagon and they changed their sound and they did this, that and the other. Of course you do that to some degree because you fucking have to. You know what I mean? If we'd have made another record like Split at that point in 1996, that would have been it. That would have been it. Correct. It would have all been over. All right. So on some level, you know, you don't have the luxury to just, you know, completely make the record that you want to. Now, I had a great time making Love Life. Don't get me wrong. But, you know, you talk yourself into justifying the record that you make. Right. And it was very clear that we had to have a kind of Lady Killers, single girl type, basic, simple, don't get all fucking clever with your musical layers and your weird harmonies. Just write a fucking hit, okay? Because that is what's required of you. Okay, fine, I'll fucking do that, you know, if that's what it takes.
Yes, we're talking about this is Split, of course, a great album. And then you mentioned this is the third one, right? Love Life, which is another great album. I like the music, as they say. Yeah, but you were right. You know, the press. I think you mentioned in the book that the second album, you know, wasn't, or the third album wasn't that received, and so forth. I don't have that many questions left. You mentioned in the book that that you and Emma were like a competitive sister, if you will. You know, it's, I don't know if you're in touch with her anymore, with Emma anymore, but what do you think you were competitive sister? I mean, the two of you were, she was writing some, you know, her song, you were writing yours. I think you mentioned somewhere that, that I don't know if the right way to say, but she looked down on your track and your song, more or less, and she want to put more emphasis in her stuff. Although if I look the number of records, the number of tracks in the three album are almost the same. You know, I think 5 each one of you, and then two that it would say Emma and Miki, so kind of split. So in terms of the number of tracks in a particular album is about the same. Some tracks begin, you know, like For Love, for example, it began more popular than another. But why the competition, if you will?
I mean, I think that you find that in every workplace. You know,
yeah.
I think, you know, people. I mean, it's very intense in a band. Bands are often formed by people who are friends, right? They start off as friends or as partners or lovers or whatever the fuck, right? It usually starts from a relationship already. And relationships are hard. You know, they are hard to maintain. And if you add the fact that you are with each other all the fucking time, right? And there are things you're going to disagree on. And, you know, sometimes one person will get more attention than the other. You know, there are new friendships formed where, you know, you're being, you know, suddenly that person is going over there and you're like, whoa, come back to me. And then sometimes, you know, that person is going, go away, leave me alone. You know what I mean? It's hard to be around each other all the time. And I think what made it even harder is there's a point where you realize you are absolutely reliant on each other, right? That in order for you to continue doing what you're doing, it's not like a normal job in that respect, because if you fucking hate your job, you can do the same thing somewhere else, right? And you will probably get paid more, right? You will probably get a promotion, and that's why it doesn't work like that with bands. If you want to go and do your own thing, you need to start again, right? Unless you're very, very lucky, unless you're one of the 0.1% of people who have that privilege. Most of us, you know, I know I'm sitting here playing little gigs to like 150 people. I know if Lush reformed, we'd fucking be playing much bigger places and blah, 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 like Ride, like Slow Dive, like whoever, you know. But any of these people try and do something on their own, it's not going to be anywhere near as successful. And we all know that. And once you know that, then you're stuck with these people. And when you're young and you start to go in different directions and you want different things, and you know, that does create quite a lot of conflict. And so, you know, I think we were both are very different people. You know, I'm not convinced that we would have been particularly close friends if after school we had separated and gone separate paths. You know, we may have still known each other, but I don't think we would have been very close because we are very different people. And and in the ways in which we're similar, that's actually quite conflicting. You know, maybe quite controlling, certainly very opinionated. You know, and you know, that's the way it works.
No wonder that, you know, bands and marriages sometimes, you know, things do not work out, and in a marriage you have the option to break up or to get divorced or whatever for one reason or another. In a band, you are stuck to one another, otherwise, because that's your source of income. And then you are with one another on touring, sometimes 200 days out of the year, and you know, you see them in the morning, and then the afternoon for a phone call or rehearsal, this or that. Like you say, in a regular job, if you are skilled for what you do, you switch company and you don't have to see your boss anymore, or, you know, or whatever. In a band, you are stuck. And there's always internal conflicts and so on and so forth. So it's
No, I completely agree. And, you know, what makes it even worse is I think that when you get like, see, I think you can get quite successful marriages. Usually it's the man, right, who's the boss, and the wife is like the fucking secretary, right? But there's a power thing there that they're happy with that. Try and fucking level that, okay? It becomes a lot trickier. And, you know, I think, I mean, I agree with you, you know, I think I've used that analogy myself, you know, when someone is asking about me and Emma, I go, look, you know, it's like a marriage. You must have been in love once, right? Because you had your children and you love your children, but, you know, pressures and life and distance and God knows what pull you apart. And so, you know, in that respect, I have no regrets in that, you know, I think we did a great thing together. You know, without Emma, there would be no Lush. So I'm, you know, endlessly grateful for fate having thrown us together to create this band. But we just found it impossible to get on, you know, and it is a shame, but I would still look at the positive and say, isn't it amazing that we managed to stick together long enough to make all that music, you know?
I completely agree. After Chris passing, I think you mentioned the book that his family was hoping that you will continue with the music. You know, of course, easy for them to say, but
well, but I'll tell you what I remember is Oliver, Chris's dad.
Yeah.
I think he said quite a touching thing to me, because it was about a year after he died, and we went up to the lakes, and Oliver, you know, said, obviously for the family, it was utterly crushing, right? It was awful. But he said, oh, I hadn't thought about how it would affect you with the band and stuff. And he did say, well, don't you want to just carry it on? And I was like, no, my heart's not in it, not without Chris, certainly. And, you know, it wasn't that he was like, oh yeah, you should carry on and blah, blah, blah. I think it was that realization that this itself was like a family, you know what I mean? And without that person, the whole thing fell apart, certainly for me. I mean, it was falling apart already, if I'm totally honest, but that definitely was the last nail in the coffin. And, and, you know, I think I was already struggling with the music industry and the direction it had taken and where Lush was and all of that. So, you know, I just got out completely. That was it. You know, I had no energy or desire to keep doing it after that. None. So I did something else, you know.
Yeah. And then in 2016, you guys, you know, was like a big reunion, and you play over 200 gigs here, at least here in the United States. And
no, we didn't play 200 gigs. No.
How many you played in 2016?
No, we played like, I don't know, maybe 20 or something.
No, 200 gigs overall in the United States, right? So,
yeah.
Taking into account all the time that you came to the United States. Yeah, I was wrong, right? That was very well received, actually. I have seen some videos and I attend a couple shows at the time. It sounds great 20 years after, you know? That's like, I don't know. It's a great band, man. It's a great music.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great. I mean, I really enjoyed the gigs, and it was really exciting, and it brought me back to music. I don't think I'd be doing music now if that Lush reunion hadn't happened. So, you know, it was brilliant on that level. On a personal level, it was not great, you know. And I think we're all still quite bruised by that, you know, all in our separate ways. I don't think anyone came out of it particularly well, personally. You know, there was a lot of blame being thrown around, but again, I'm not that surprised. You know, these things happen, and bands are notorious, you know, they really are. So
it's easy to look back, right? It's easy to look back and look at the past and analyze the past. Hey, we could have done that. We should have done that. And well, we didn't. It didn't work out, or this or that. You know, it's that the way it is, I suppose, right? So,
well, you know what it reminds me of, right? It's like I can remember this when I had my children and they were still quite small, and I would go and visit either my dad or my mum, right? Who I loved. I love my dad. I love my mum. She's still alive. There is something about being around your parents that within 10 fucking minutes you turn into a teenager, right? They have an ability to just say something where you go, oh my God, right? And I think me and Emma had a similar effect on each other. We struggled to not do that, but at some point that flare goes up and it's just not gonna fucking work, you know. And you know.
Yeah, and thank you. And the last question, I think you toured here recently in the United States. Any possibility of I think you mentioned when you were playing New York that I read somewhere that you may be touring again in 2025 here in the United States. I know you're doing some touring in the UK nowadays and in Glasgow, but
well, we're going to put an album out next year.
Okay.
So when we put the album out, we can look at, you know, coming to America. I mean, I'd love to come. And also because last time Moose didn't come. So it was just me and Ollie, and we played with Mick Conroy, who was in Piroshka. So next time Moose has agreed to come. He doesn't like flying. He doesn't agree with flying, but we've managed to get him to agree to come to America. So we will try and capitalize on that. Yes.
And then you need to play in DC. I can recommend you many venues you can play. And
but you know, we can't. It's not like we can come for a very long time. Like I said, we all have jobs.
Yeah. Well, 10 days. I don't know. 20 days, 10 days, right? You know, every other day, because you need to go from city to city. But it was very nice talking to you, Miki. We're talking about this book. It's a great book. I bought it on Amazon. It's a great read. You know, crazy life story, but that's what life is about. And you were part of a great band called Lush, and I'm glad that, you know, with all the conflict and all the problem with bands and aim and this and that, you guys did great music. And hey, maybe we'll do you know, Emma reform Lush, if you will, one day. And
well, no, I mean, you know, Emma's got a record out. Emma's doing her own music. You know, Phil's doing his film and blah blah blah. I mean, I don't know. I've heard he's writing a book, so you know. So in a way, I think, okay, great. You know, everyone has branched off and, you know, doing their own thing. So fair play, you know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely.
All it was very nice.
That's right. Also, it was very nice talking to you, Miki, and I will see you hopefully in October in one of your gigs.
Okay, great.
As I said, I'm going to London there, so I would like to see you playing live. Me too. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Cheers.